Hello everyone, welcome. We're having a few technical issues with the link. So I'm hoping that people will find this new link. For some reason, I bought some software, or I downloaded some software that should pick up on the original link that I set up, and it hasn't. So I do apologise. I'm hoping that people are going to find this new link pretty quickly. I can see on the original link that there's people waiting, and I do apologise about that. So we'll just wait for a few people to join, and hopefully they're going to find this new link pretty soon. Hi Alan, how are you? Nice to see you, mate. Did you click on the other link, Alan? Because we've had a few problems here. So, what have you been up to, Alan? You been planting anything in your garden, etc.? Just wait for a few others to join. You clicked on the pop-up, right, okay. Okay, we'll carry on. There's been an issue with the link, but we'll carry on. So, I've got this software that I've downloaded, and the idea was to put some pictures and videos into the live to make it a bit more interesting. And the videos are struggling to upload, and that's really because of the power of the laptop. So I've tried putting some more coal in it and it just hasn't worked. So we're going to have to live with some still images. So I'm learning the software as we go. So if it goes wrong, I do apologise. Hi Lorraine. Hi Chilling. So potatoes. I thought today would be a good day to do this. It's a St. Patrick's Day, which is normally the day that we would all go out and plant our potatoes. I'll just say one thing about tradition, and that is the potato and the weather don't know that it's St. Patrick's Day. So if you're living in an area where it's really cold, or your garden's like a swamp, then just hold fire. There's plenty of time still to plant your potatoes. Even if you didn't plant them into April, it wouldn't be the end of the world. So I did manage to get out yesterday and plant my potatoes. So I got 8 pots of Charlotte put in and 3 pots of Lady Crystal. And I'm going to be running an experiment again this year to see which composts, which fertilizers, etc. work the best. So have you guys got any potatoes in the ground yet? What are you growing? And are you growing them in the ground, or are you growing them in pots? We did have a rare visitor to the garden yesterday, and there it is. The sun appeared for a few hours and then it rained for the rest of the day. So it was pretty wet planting those potatoes, I have to say. So who've we got in? Alan, Lorraine, Chilling. So what have you guys got in the ground? You got stuff growing yet? Potatoes in pots or the ground? And what varieties are you growing? I'd be interested to see what people are growing. Hi Stephen, that's 11 pots more than me. Mind you, we did get an email from our supplier, my spuds are on the way. Yeah, you've been waiting for those, haven't you? You said that last week that they hadn't arrived, so yeah, you better get them in when they arrive, Alan. Stephen, if you're weather's warm enough, I guess. So yeah, I put 4 seed potatoes in each pot, and I've used various different fertilizers as an experiment to see which one works the best. And I'm trying 6 times fertilizer for the first time this year. Never used it before, and it's apparently 6 times, covers 6 times the area as farmyard manure would. So it's £15 a bag. I thought I'd give it a go. I'm probably going to put a bit around my rhubarb as well. Alan, due to health reasons, gave up allotment, so we'll be growing in containers, not growing earlies. Okay. So when it comes to earlies, I always grow the earlies in pots. Now, I used to grow them in the ground, but I grow them in pots now. And I do that because we plant them at a time of year where they're likely to come up out of the compost before the last frost date. I mean, my last frost date here is about the 20th of April. So if they're in pots, it makes it easier for me to move them. We can put them in the shed or the greenhouse to keep them out of any really cold weather on a night. And the other thing about growing them in pots is it's easier to control the type of soil and compost that you use. So that's another reason I do it. And it's better pest protection. So slugs, wireworm, things like that. Your potatoes are a lot more likely to get attacked by them when they're in the ground as opposed to a pot. The only downside I'd say with growing potatoes in pots is you are cramming them in a little bit. They're 40-litre pots that I'm using, so it is sort of intensive gardening. When you think traditionally we would put potatoes every foot, space them every foot in rows 2 feet apart. So there is that downside. And watering in the summer, it can get quite difficult to keep them hydrated all the time. As the potatoes are growing, they're pumping that water out of the pots. So yeah, that's the only downside. And so I grow my main crop, some of my main crop I will put in the ground for that reason. It's easier to keep on top of the watering. So let's just have a look down the chat here. Lorraine, I put some store-bought potatoes in the ground and they have just started shooting, and planted some in cloth tubs the other day. I can't remember the variety. That's all right. Potato's a potato, doesn't matter. Hi Crochet Mama, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Stephen, red Nordland for me. I've never grown those, Stephen. Just the one variety, as these have become our favourite. Right, okay. Is red Nordland an early? It must be, I guess. We grow Charlotte as an early because we really like them, and they produce quite well and easy to grow, and they store reasonably well too. Main crop tend to store a lot better than earlies, but we've found that Charlotte store reasonably well. So planting them, I plant them in the pots like this. So the photo on the left, that's a 40-litre pot with about 4 inches of compost in the bottom, and there's 2 seed potatoes there, about 2 inches from the side, with the chits facing upwards, obviously. And then the photo on the right is the same pot with another 4 inches of compost on top, and then 2 more seed potatoes, but at 90 degrees to the first 2. And then I'll fill that pot up. And so that's how I put the 4 potatoes in the pot. And it works very well. I've done it for quite a few years now, and it seems to work really well. Now, because early potatoes are determinate, most early potatoes, they only grow on one level under the ground. So that's why we can get away with putting them at two different levels in the pot. We don't need to mound early potatoes up. And for many years I was growing every potato that I grew, I'd mound it up because I thought that was what you should do. And we've all got this sort of vision in our heads of a farmer's field with lots of rows of mounded up potatoes. And yeah, we don't need to do it with early varieties. They only grow on one level under the ground. So they are early then. Okay, thanks Stephen. Chilling. Last season I chitted up a bag of store-bought rooster potatoes, put it in the 20-litre pots, and had great results. I kept some and will be planting shortly, doing 3 different store-bought this season. Yeah, so I saved my own seed potato as well, and probably 6 of those 8 pots of Charlotte were my home saved seed from last year. And when it comes to saving seed potatoes, the way I do it is I will harvest the potatoes, I will let them dry off on the bench in the shed for about a week. I'll put some cardboard over them so that they're in the dark, and then when the skins go a bit tougher and they've dried out a little bit, I will sort through the potatoes, and any that are damaged will come straight up to the house and we'll eat them first. And then I will select ones that are sort of egg size and put those in a paper bag, sort of thing you get from Amazon, and they'll live there until the following spring. And I just check them every now and again to make sure that none of them are rotting. But it's really important that when you're saving seed potato that you only save really good, healthy, quality potatoes. Don't put any that are damaged or anything like that in the bag, because if they rot, then they're all going to rot. Lorraine, just check my eBay. It was Charlotte that I purchased. Lovely potato. We really enjoy them. Yeah, very nice. Stephen, knowing me, when I see the seed spuds in Walmart's garden section, I'll be tempted to buy others. Why not? I did that the other week at the garden centre. I thought, I've got my Charlotte that I saved from last year, and I ended up buying some Lady Crystal. So, you know, that's a gardening thing, innit? You can't help it. You can't help it. I've got more seeds than a garden centre, I think, at the moment. Chilling, Sarpo Mira seems to be a good choice. Yeah, a lot of people grow those, don't they? I've never grown them, but I really should. I should give it a go, I think. Yeah, definitely. So, let me look down my notes here. So, when it comes to main crop, when do people plant their main crop? Because a lot of people plant all their potatoes at the same time. They'll put their earlies in and their main crop at the same time. I try to stagger it a bit. I probably won't put my main crop in until the end of March, beginning of April, because we grow a lot of earlies. So by putting the main crop in a bit later, it gives us more chance to harvest and eat some of the earlies before we're then inundated with main crop as well. So that's how we tend to do it here. But what do you guys do? Do you put it in at the same time, or do you stagger the plantings? And with the main crop, I tend to put them in the ground more than in pots, because they main crop tend to grow bigger potatoes, then they need a bit more space, and they also, in the height of the summer, because main crop grow a lot longer than earlies, the watering can be difficult when they're in pots in the summer, I find, because they're growing right through the heat of the main part of the summer. So that's what I tend to do there. Steve, yeah, it's got to be done, Stephen. You've got to buy seeds when you're in the garden centre, and potatoes. Onion sets as well, I've got to get those in the ground. So what are people growing? Is everyone growing in the ground or in the pots? I see somebody said they were putting them in bags. Never grown in bags, I've only ever grown in pots. Are they like grow bags, or are they proper potato, you know, the little bags that you get for potatoes are like 20 or 30 litre potato bags, aren't they? Got to be done. Just look down the chat. Okay, we're up to speed there. So when it comes to frost protection, it's important to remember that if the leaves of the potato are touching the inside of the fleece or the polythene, then they will still be damaged by the frost. And I had that last year. I put some polythene over the early potatoes I had, and just a few of the leaves touched the inside of the polythene, and they did get damaged and they went black and died. The leaves, the actual plant was fine, but the leaves died. But what you can do, if it's only going to be cold on a night, you don't have to use something that's transparent. You could just put a tarp over them, just a normal blue-green tarp, and that should protect them from the frost as long as they're not touching it. And then in the morning you're going to go down and uncover it anyway to give the plant some light. So you don't have to have polythene or fleece. You could just use a plastic sheet or a tarp, as long as they get some daylight the next day. So what about feeds? Does anybody put extra feed in with their potatoes in the ground or in tubs? I'm trying this year fish blood and bone. I'm trying 6 times fertiliser, and I'm also trying Vitax potato feed, which I've used last year, and it came a very close second to my homemade compost. So I personally would recommend that. It does seem to add quite a bit of goodness to the soil, or to the pot that you're growing the potatoes in. And yeah, very close second to my homemade compost. The fisherman. I did my spuds in containers in the greenhouse today. We'll do my trench ones on the allotment at Easter. Okay, so you put your earlies in pots and your main crop in the ground, I'm guessing there. Do you add anything into the trench? Because there's different ways of growing them in the ground, isn't there? Some people dig a trench. I tend to just make a hole and put the potato in. Do you add any fertilisers or any well-rotted manure into the trench when you're doing that, or general purpose compost? I tend to add a bit of compost if possible when I'm planting them in the ground. Yeah, so definitely recommend that fertiliser, that Vitax. Fish blood and bone, I'm testing it again this year, but last year it didn't seem to add much to the actual crop of potatoes in those pots. So I'm going to give it one more go this year, and if it doesn't perform better, then I won't be doing it again. I will be doing more of the potato feed, and if possible my homemade compost, because that certainly seems to be the one that the potatoes grow the best in. The problem is sieving it. It's just when it's wet, trying to get it sieved to be nice and fine in the pots. Stephen, couple of 30 litre tubs, so as I can move them into the shed if there's chance of a frost. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. Because they are quite a fragile plant, potatoes, when it comes to cold weather. And yeah, they do need to be protected from the cold and the frost. The fisherman, yes, I add compost in the trench just to run along the bottom of the trench, and some grass cuttings to prevent scab. Okay, so there's a good tip for people. Grass cuttings prevent scab. I've never had that problem, but good tip, thank you. Does anybody mulch around the top of their potatoes? Do they grass cuttings, or anyone use stuff like strulch or anything like that? I generally don't, because I don't want to give anywhere another habitat for the slugs, really. So I tend to just do the best I can to keep stuff watered and hydrated. But I was reading a news report earlier today. It flashed up on my computer, and it's something about we're going to have a very, very hot April. So that's good from a frost point of view, but maybe not if things are getting really dry. We've gone from being really wet, and now we're going to go to really hot, and no doubt we're all going to be complaining that there's hosepipe bans and things like that. Stephen, fish blood and bone, but I've never seen it all in one here. I have to buy each one independently and mix them. Right, okay, that's interesting. I wonder why that is then. You can't get it mixed in the States. Could you not get it Amazon or something like that? They not ship it there or something? I don't know. But that's strange. I wouldn't have thought there's any reason you couldn't do that. Yvonne, fish blood and bone and chicken manure pellets added into the tubs and the ground. Okay, yeah, I've heard good stuff about chicken manure pellets. We did get some the other year actually, and I put them around some of the other veg, but not in with the potatoes. But I think that 6 times fertiliser that I'm using has got a lot of chicken manure in it. So it'll be interesting. I've basically put a handful at 3 different layers throughout the pot, and yeah, we'll see how it performs against the potato feed and the fish blood and bone. I know a lot of people do use it, so it's my first year giving it a go. So what about watering? Does anyone have irrigation set up for their pots? Things like that, automatic timers or anything, because they can dry out so quickly. I don't, but it is something I might look at, especially if we're going to have a really hot summer, just to try and keep on top of it, like a drip feed throughout the day. Stephen, I'll put a chopped up straw on top just to keep the moisture in. Yeah. Do you find that can harbour pests and slugs? That's the reason I don't do it. I just don't want to encourage things to live under it and then eat on my potatoes. Eka, hi Jason, I use 6X. Okay, I've heard good stuff about it. I ended up getting it because I was in the garden centre about, I don't know, a month ago, and I was loading my trolley up with farmyard manure, and the lady came over and she said, well, you'd actually be better off with 6 times. So I thought I'll give it a go, and it's more economical. If it's as good, it's more economical. Upbeat allotment, hi there, thank you for joining. I'm going to put rotted horse manure on the bottom and then some compost on the top for my potatoes this year. Okay, so lots of feed there, and yeah, you should have a good crop with all that going in. A few years ago, I grew some King Edward in the ground, and I put some manure on top of the soil after I'd planted the potatoes. And I think the manure was perhaps still a little bit fresh, because I ended up with a massive amount of foliage, and all that nitrogen seemed to really make the plant grow, but I don't think it necessarily increased the yield. So these King Edward were almost as tall as me, you know, they were getting up towards the top of the fence. So yeah, I think you can overdo the nitrogen side of it, and I think a lot of these green composts as well now, some of them have too much nitrogen in. In fact, let's have a quick look at this potato feed. Does it tell us? Total nitrogen, 4%. So phosphorus 0.6 and potassium 6.6%. So they're the sort of number, if that's a potato feed and it's worked well when I've used it before, so they're the sort of things you should be trying to achieve, I guess, when you're adding compost and stuff. The fisherman, I was taught to be careful with fertiliser for spuds, too much and you can end up with lush green growth and small potatoes. It's just what we were talking about, isn't it? Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. And yeah, it really, like I say, these King Edward was almost to the top of the fence. They went mad. And because your main crop potatoes are indeterminate, then they can get really quite big. Some varieties can get sort of 10, 12 feet tall. And yeah, they can get a bit out of hand. Yvonne, was it expensive though, the 6 times? Yvonne, it was 15 quid for a sort of compost sized bag, you know, a 50 litre, 60 litre bag. And if you compare that to the price of a mixed farmyard manure bag, at about say £5, but the 6 times goes 6 times further, then economically it makes sense. Eka, it's good stuff, but it stinks for about a week. Do you know what? When I put it in the pots yesterday and I opened the bag and yeah, it really has got a strong smell. And even though I washed my hand, had a shower and everything, I could still smell it, you know. So yeah, it's good stuff. Hi Mags, yeah, don't worry about it. We had a few issues with the link. Well, I think I did. I tried to, new software you see, Mags. So I tried to open the link that I set up before I got the software, and it didn't seem to work. So then I came out of it, tried again, and we're here. So I'm hoping that it all works properly. Yeah, it does smell. It really does. So when it comes to harvesting, what do people do there? Because I tend to, with the earlies, if I'm doing an experiment, then obviously I have to harvest all the pots at the same time to make it a fair experiment. But if not, I will just cut off the foliage and I will leave the potatoes in the pot, and we'll just go get them as and when we want them. With the main crop, then I will if they're in the ground, I will dig them all up at the same time, because I find that if I leave them in the ground, which is perfectly okay, but I find the slugs and wireworm and all that sort of stuff starts to get into them, so I dig them all up. Yvonne, £13.49 for a 15 kilogram bag. 6 times is that? Is that 6 times you're talking about? Oh, okay. Wow, where's that from? Is that online or something? Because I think I paid 15 quid at the garden centre. Stephen, bit like the chicken manure. Yeah, pen and inks. Your shed stinking of it. Yeah, yeah, it does. It does smell. I actually quite like it, to be honest. It's like sort of nice fertiliser garden smell, isn't it? The fisherman. It's better, I found, to add some pellet feed or manure around the plants about a month before harvesting. The rain washes it down to the spuds and helps to swell them. Okay, so there's a tip. I suppose that makes sense, doesn't it? Because I think, don't potatoes grow, flower, and then sort of really start to put on the tuber size? So that makes sense, you know, that to give them a feed at that point. Steve Bramall, Steve Bramall, it is chicken manure. Yeah, I think it is. I think there's a lot of chicken manure, isn't there? It's 6 times. On Amazon, right? Okay. Okay, so when I need some more, then I'll get it on Amazon. Lorraine, I do get a little confused with all this early and main crop potatoes as still learning, hence why I was eager to watch this. Okay, so in essence, your early potatoes are determinate. It's a term used to describe the way the plant grows above ground. Okay, and if you think what the word means, it's preset, it's determined that the plant is going to get to a certain size, do its job, and then die. Like a bush tomato, it will only get to a certain size. Early potatoes only grow on one level under the ground. So that's why we can get away with planting them on different levels in the pot. Main crop potatoes grow for longer, and they'll grow through the summer. So your earlies will typically grow for 75 to 100 days, depending on variety and conditions, and then they're ready. Your main crop will grow for around 120, 130 days, again, depending on variety and conditions. But main crop potatoes can grow on multiple levels under the ground, and that's why we mound those up, because you don't want any tubers in the light, because if they're in the light they'll go green, and you shouldn't eat them if they're green. So hope that makes sense. And as for planting them, if you're planting them in the ground, plant them 4 or 5 inches deep. Chilling. Last season I soaked each tub about 5 times a week, hosed until water runs out the bottom. I never had any issues with bugs or anything touching the potatoes. I used fish blood and bone and some chicken manure pellets. Yeah. Okay. Like I say, when I tried fish blood and bone last year, compared it to the other stuff, it didn't perform as well. I was surprised. This performed far better than the fish blood and bone. But I'm doing it again this year, so we'll find out. Lorraine, thank you. Yeah, I hope that sort of makes sense, Lorraine. I do have a video coming out, I'm plugging my video here, at 9 o'clock tonight about how I planted all the potatoes and that yesterday. So, but I thought it would be a good time to put it out after this live. So when it comes to storing potatoes, what do people do there? Yesterday I pulled out of storage the last of my pink fir apple, which is a main crop, and I grew these in the ground, and I love those potatoes. They're fantastic. In fact, this is one here, and they grow sort of long. They can sort of have knobbles on them. They can grow in like another potato off the side, and some of them get really quite weird shaped. But really nice potato, make fantastic mash. And these I've stored. This is one that I harvested last August, September, and stored it all winter. And the way I do it is I will main crop harvest them all at the same time, and then put them on the bench in the shed, or leave them on the ground outside. If it's a nice sunny day, leave them on the ground where you've harvested them from, just to let the skins dry out a little bit. And then I'll move them to the shed, put them on the bench, so that they're not touching each other. And then I will cover them with some cardboard or some sacks, anything, so that there's no light getting to the tubers. And then after about a week, I will go through them, make sure that any that are damaged come up to the house, and we'll cut out the damaged bits and eat those. And I'll select my seed potatoes from there, and like I said, I'll put them in a paper bag, and the rest I will put in storage. And I will store them just in pots of compost. So I'll put an inch or so of compost in the bottom, and then I'll lay the potatoes out in there so that they're not touching each other. They mustn't touch each other. And then another couple of inches of compost, and then another layer of potatoes, and so on and so on until the pot's full. And I find that they last months and months and months that way. And well, there you go. Harvested beginning of last autumn, and we've had some of these today on a roast dinner. Really nice. Definitely recommend growing pink fir apple. Stephen, talking of watering the spuds, I'm adding rainwater storage, especially as we are on a metered mains water, and it can get rather expensive using a hose during the heat of the summer. Yeah, we're on a water meter here as well. We do have a couple of little water butts about, but they can easily get used up if we have a few days of hot weather. And my plan down the garden is to add some IBC containers to collect all the water off the shed roofs and the polytunnel when I get it covered, because they pump water out of those pots. They really do. Yvonne, they look a bit hard to peel. Do you know what, Yvonne? They are. Especially when they grow all knobbly. In fact, no, they've been moved. They're in the other room. But like I said, they can have these big knobbles on, and the easiest way to peel them is to just snap those off, and yeah, just go for it that way. Another thing we do with these, just give them a scrub, because you can eat the skins obviously, so just give them a scrub with a nail brush, and they make nice chips too, really nice chips. Yeah, so storing potatoes, that's how I do it. How do you guys do it? Does anyone chop them up and freeze them or anything like that? And on freezing, some people get a bit funny about putting damaged potatoes in their compost heaps, because they're probably going to grow potatoes and in the compost. But that's fine, you can eat the potatoes out of the compost heap anyway. I've done that quite a lot. But if you are really worried about that, then just get the potatoes that you don't want, that are damaged, put them in a plastic bag, put them in the freezer overnight. That will kill the potato, and then put them on the compost heap. And that gets around the problem of growing potatoes in your compost heap. So let me have a look down my notes. Does anyone do any liquid feeds for potatoes? Any sort of teas or anything like that? It's not something I've tried, but I'm wondering if it would work. I mean, like with my onions, I will water them with a diluted seaweed mix. And I'm wondering if there's something that we could water potatoes with, like we do with tomatoes and other plants. And I suppose we could try a tomato feed in the watering can. Maybe that would help bring the potatoes on and increase the yield. Upbeat allotment. I never peel my potatoes. A lot of goodness in the skin. Just a good wash. Absolutely, yeah. No reason why not. Stephen. Boil and mash hours, form them into patties and then freeze them and vacuum seal them. Okay. In fact, we're still having mash from last year. Wow. Wow. Okay. Hi Mags, how are you? How do you store your seed potatoes from your harvest? So yeah, we just covered that. I let them dry on the bench in the shed, cover them with cardboard. After about a week, when the skins have gone hard, then I will layer them in compost, pots of compost between all the potatoes. None of the potatoes are touching each other, and that's one that is from last year. So yeah, it's a really easy way, I find, of doing it. You can wrap them in paper, you can do all sorts of stuff, but I find using the compost from last year, or the compost that they grew in, a really easy way of doing it. And of course, although we're spending a lot of money relatively on compost to grow these potatoes, you're then going to use that compost to store them, and then in the spring I use that compost to put on the beds as a soil conditioner. So I'm using that compost 3 times. So when you look at it like that, it's not quite so bad. Chilling. The only time I've had potatoes flowering was when it was growing in the compost heap. I do compost teas. Okay, compost teas. The only time I've had potatoes. Yeah, I did an experiment last year. I grew 2 rows of potatoes. And there's this theory that some people believe where if you take the flowers off, pinch them off, it puts more goodness down into the potato tubers, increases the yield. And I did an experiment where I had 2 rows and I picked the flowers off one row and let the potatoes just grow naturally on the other row. It didn't make any difference. Not on my experiment, no difference whatsoever. So it's not something that I'm going to do again. I don't think it's worth it. I think if there is any benefit to it, it's very minimal. So, Stephen, I think your spuds are knobbly. If you think your spuds are knobbly, wait until you harvest your Jerusalem artichokes. Yeah, I did have a look at those pots today, Stephen, and there's nothing coming up yet. So, Salvage Garden. Hi Colin. I use nettle and borage liquid feed mixed together with good results. Okay, so people are using teas then. Right, I've never done it, so maybe I'll give that a go. Maybe I'll have to set up another experiment where I do liquid feeds of different types, you know. I'd be interested to try seaweed, I think, and see if that makes any difference. So, has anybody got any other suggestions on storing potatoes? Because it's obviously if you've spent so much effort and time growing the potatoes, storing them is really important, because we grow a hell of a lot of potatoes, really, for a family of three, and we'll be eating potatoes all year until we're still eating them now from last year. So storing them's a really important aspect. So if there's other ways to store them other than in compost or freezing them, then let me know, because we'd be interested. Lorraine, I have been growing my tea leaves throwing my tea leaves on the ground as well as eggshells. Yeah, why not? My granddad used to go to his house, and that's what he did. Tea bags and eggshells were all over the garden. Didn't bother composting them, they just got chucked on the garden. And I think some people say if you crush up eggshells around the plants, it can deter slugs. I'm not convinced, but I think slugs, if they want to go over something, they'll go over it. They're an absolute nightmare, and I've had slug pots out in the ground now for probably a month, and I've got loads and loads of slugs in there. Chilling. For seed, I wrap them up individually in newspaper, then store in a dark place. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people do that. I didn't last year. I just put them in paper bags, and they were fine. And I did that with Pink for Apple, King Edward and Charlotte, and they were fine. But you do have to make sure that the potatoes you're going to save as seed are in A1 condition. There's nothing wrong with them. So, mags. I save the leachate from my hot bin composter. Not sure how to use it though. Could I use it to feed potatoes? Yeah, so that's all horribleness running out the bottom of the compost heap, I take it. I don't see why not, but what I'd perhaps do is dilute it. So maybe do 1 part to 10 parts water or something to start with, and do an experiment, and maybe grow a couple of plants, maybe some beans or peas or something, and just experiment on one of them and compare the two and see how it goes, because a lot of teas and stuff can be very strong. So yeah, just go careful to start with, I would suggest. Stephen, I did plant some comfrey a couple of years ago and had a small harvest from it last year. This year I'll use some for liquid feed. Yeah, I need to get a comfrey plant. But they can take over, can't they? Don't you have to be quite sort of careful where you plant them, because they can be a bit invasive? Or am I getting that wrong? But yeah, I know comfrey is a very good way of doing it. And nettles, of course. If you can get a lot of nettles and soak them in a barrel for a month or so, and then that's a really good tea for watering and fertilising crops. Because slugs can smell your veg a mile away. I know they can, believe me. Absolute nightmare. And the ones that cause the most damage are the small ones. So we have a lot of grey field slugs here, and they're just horrendous. And for your potatoes, the slugs that are going to cause the damage are the keeled slugs, the ones that live under the ground. So yeah, they're the problem for potatoes. Salvage gardener. I found making sure that the potatoes are properly dried off before storage. The moisture content determines how good they store. Yeah, I agree. Like I say, I leave them for at least a week, somewhere dry, airy and in the dark, to harden the skins up. And then I am very meticulous about what I store and what I don't store. always. Bocking 14, always a great feed. Okay. Is that the name of it? Bocking? I've never heard of it. Never heard of that. So, sorry. Mags, thanks, I'll try that. Yeah, give it a go, Mags, and let us know how you get on. Stephen, I actually bought a Bocking 14 variety recommended by Steve at Greenside. Okay, so he's Bocking Comfrey. Never heard of it, so is that a variety of Comfrey? Stephen, the plus side with Comfrey is bees love it. Yeah. Yeah. And attracting all bees and whatever to your garden is always good, isn't it? I've just been noticing in this room, every year, up in this corner, we get ladybirds hibernating. I suppose they hibernate, don't they? And I can literally see about 7, 8 of them now, all up in the corner of the ceiling. And every year they do it, and they must just, when the doors open, they go out into the garden. So. Danny boy, hi, how you doing? Bocking 14 Comfrey is the best. It doesn't spread, it doesn't set seed. I've got a big patch and it hasn't moved. Right, okay. Okay, that's what I need to get then. A Bocking 14 Comfrey plant. And how big do they grow? How tall? Because I've got an area that I want to fill, if that makes sense. How big can they get? Because as I develop the upper plot of the veg area, there's going to be a lot more beds, so that's going to be a good fertiliser for various crops as we expand the veg plot. Hopefully I'll get around to doing some of that this year, but the house has got to come first. Chilling, Stephen, yeah, 100% Bocking 14 Comfrey. Right, okay, I need to look into that then. I definitely need to look into that. So, so what's people's favourite varieties? Let's just have a quick comment down there. Ours are definitely Charlotte as an early. And I think King Edward's got to be joint favourite with Pink Fir Apple for the main crop. Because I think King Edward's an all-round go-to potato, isn't it, for everything? Roasts, chips, mash, the lot. So I always grow those. And I guess it's something that I've always seen members of the family doing over the years as well. So I grow those, King Edward, and I'll be planting those end of the month probably, just into April, just to stagger that harvest a bit from the early potatoes. And okay guys, we're approaching the hour already. Eka, King Edward, yeah, I agree. Lovely potato. I had a terrible harvest with them last year though. I think it was really down to I was trying to grow them in pots, and we had quite a warm few weeks, and I think the watering wasn't enough. I went on holiday for a week, and I don't think they had enough moisture to really come on. Mags, Charlotte, and is that Maris Piper or Maria Piper? I've grown Maris Piper before. Chilling, from what I found, B14, it seems to have an MBK of 1.8, 0.5 and 5.3. Okay. Definitely need to get one of those plants, don't I? A comfrey plant. So, Salvage Gardener, monkey puzzle trees are great for ladybirds to hibernate in. Mine is 5 foot tall and smothered in ladybirds. Right, okay. There you go, monkey puzzle tree to attract ladybirds. Maris Piper, thought so. Lorraine, I'm experimenting this year, has only ever put shop bought potatoes in the ground, and as you can imagine, only got a handful. Okay, so with potatoes, it's like, this is actually a potato that's been bought from the supermarket, and as you can see, it's chitting. That's because it's been in a warm, light environment. But if I was to plant it, I wouldn't expect great results from that, because depending when this was grown, potatoes need to have a period of time where they rest. So if this potato was being imported from somewhere and it was grown in the last few months, then that probably won't produce much in the way of a crop, because it hasn't had the rest time. So yeah, you need to keep them by seed potatoes, because they will have been grown last year and had their rest time, and then they're ready to plant in the spring. Steve Bramwell. That's the one reason for the red Nordland first earlies, as they're out before the scorching heat of the summer. Yeah, that's the same with Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte are about 100 days-ish, 90 to 100 days. So I plant them now. They'll be out the ground by the end of June, and I don't have to worry about watering in the pots through the heat of the summer. Yvonne. Maris Bard first early. Lovely salad potato. Never grown them. Never grown those. This is a problem with so many varieties, isn't there, that you find one that you like and you can grow quite easily, and then you stick with it because you don't want to risk another one that doesn't work out. Danny Boy, what's the best way to store potatoes main crop? Is it to leave it in the buckets or store in a sack in the house? Danny, I put them in the buckets, in the compost that they grew in, making sure that they're not touching each other, and they're totally surrounded by compost. But again, make sure the skins have cured a bit, that they've dried out before you store them, and only store A1 potatoes. Don't store them if they're damaged or got holes or bugs in them, things like that, because they'll just rot. So yeah, I don't store them in sacks. I store them in the buckets. So guys, we're over the hour. If any of you have got a YouTube channel, then say so in the chat. Put the name of your channel down, and you know, hopefully then other people can go and look at your channel, etc. And thank you very much for coming along. I think I've got through all my notes now, that points I was going to discuss. Has anybody got any more questions before we wrap this up? Have I got through all the comments? Sorry if I've missed anybody's comments. I think I've got through them. Yeah, I think I've got through them. Okay guys, well thank you very much for coming along. I'm going to wrap that up now, and I'll pick a subject for next week's live and put a link out. So